Hello.
Hey, Elazar. Mario.
Yes.
¿Qué tal?
Muy bien.
Sí.
¿Y?
Bueno. Tranquilo.
What?
Tranquilo.
Tranquilo.
Tranquilo. No,
Okay.
taquilo. Taquilo. Tranquilo.
How do you like this?
Oh, Feliz Navidad.
You know,
Yes.
in Israel, they have, when they have the shot, the vaccine, and they take the second vaccine again. What do they call taking the second vaccine? You know, when you take it the second time, what do they call it?
I don't know.
Hazor shots.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
In Israel, they already have the vaccine and they can't get they're vaccinating people like crazy and they can't get their acts together here.
Yeah. Yeah.
My son's.
Good evening.
How are you, doctor?
Good. So tomorrow we can learn if you want at 9 in the morning.
Okay.
Okay?
Good. Good.
Okay. So
34.
Around 34, Lamed Daled. It said that Rav Ashi, the reason why we didn't eat those wheat kernels, or we weren't choishesh, right? There was, how can you burn the wheat kernels? Maybe the person will come to eat it, the Kohen who eats something tomei. So he answered, B'shlikasu mi asasa. It was thrown away in like a corner where it got dirty and disgusting. So therefore, there's no chashash that people are going to eat it. Achanami b'shlikasu mi asasa. Ve'hecha itmer de Rav Ashi. Where do we see that Rav Ashi said something like that? Aha, on here. Dar Rav Avin bar Rav Ava Rav Yitzchak Abashol Gabol Shel Beis Rebbe Aya. Abashol was the dough maker. He needed all the dough for the house of Rebbe. It was a big job. Rebbe was the Reish Galut, was the Nasi, and he was a very wealthy man. And there was probably hundreds of people coming to his table every day. So Abba Shaul was the bread maker for Rebbe. They would use warm water to do the kneading, and they would heat up the water using kernels of truma tmeya. Remember, what do you do with truma tmeya? You can't eat it. Kohen can't eat it. He can burn it. So they would use it. They would buy that cheap. It would be less expensive because the Kohanim, there's not a whole lot you can do with it. The Kohanim would sell it for fuel. So the Gemara says, Amai, why did Rebbe allow that to happen? Well, if you're going to have a bunch of chitim that are truma tmeya hanging around that you're going to use for fuel, someone's going to come to eat it. No, they threw it in a corner. It got dirty, and therefore there was no chashash that people were going to eat it. Okay. Abaya Baravin, Rav Chananya Baravin, Tanu Trumas Beirabba. They learned the Mishnayos of Trumas by the Yeshiva of Rabbah. Pogubu Rava Bar Masna. Rava Bar Masna made up with them. What was taught in the yeshiva about the sugi of Trumas? Why? Do you have a specific problem, a difficulty in the sugi of trumas? Amalu, yeah, I'll go Tanan. Shesile trumos. These are plantings, seedlings. You had seeds that were truma, but you planted them, and now you have new growth. Right? Shtile trumos shenitmu. The seeds have become tame, but then you planted them in the ground. Shaslan. Tahori milatame. So you remove from that item the ability to transfer tuma to something else. The planting them in the ground purifies it from truma. Why, says Rashi? Because planting it, it's not toiras oichel anymore. Remember, only oichel umashkin can become tame. But once you planted these seeds in the ground, they're not food anymore. So they can't be makabel tuma, and they can't convey tuma. However, asurim melechol betruma. But you can't eat it. Kohanim cannot eat it. L'chura, there's some vestige of tuma remaining. So the Gemara doesn't v'chimi. If they cannot be metame another food stuff, then amay asurim melechol. Then why can't the Kohanim eat it? So that was the difficulty he had. So Amrulay, so they responded that in yeshiva, Hachi Amarabba, my Asurin Lazarin, that in a Chanami, it doesn't mean that Kohanim are Asur to eat it. They can eat it, but Yisraelim cannot eat it. The Shem Truma is not removed from it. It's not Tomei anymore. But just by burying it, you can't remove its status because it started off as Truma. And therefore it remains prohibited for a non-Kohen to eat it. Frank the Gemara, why did I need you to teach me this?
Can a zor, if it's dissolved completely, why can't a zor eat something that's truma, that's dissolves completely? It doesn't have a shame anymore. It changes completely.
Because we're about to learn that gidulei truma are truma. If you take truma, gidulei truma.
If it doesn't look, it's changed completely. It's nothing.
Gidulei truma remain truma. If you take seeds, I had pumpkin seeds, and I had 100 bushels, and I took 1 bushel, 2 bushels, and I designated them as truma. And I could eat the pumpkin seeds, or I could bury the pumpkin seeds.
Okay, all right.
Plant the pumpkin seeds, there will be. This is truma and remains truma. If it's truma tmeya, it will purify it from tuma, but it doesn't purify it from the din of truma. And the Gemara wants to tell us, why did you have to teach me? We know this already. Gidulei truma, tanina. We've got gidulei truma. So the chitema, maybe you'll tell me. Gidulin. Maybe growth. You have the new growth, and then you have maybe you plant it again or something, like a secondary growth. That umay kamashim l'medavar she'ein zarakala. For example, you had like an onion. An onion is considered the classic item in Chazal that zaro is not kala, right? Those bulbs, the onion bulbs remain, and you have new bulbs. Umay kamashim l'medavar she'ein zarakala. That perhaps we're going to be told that gidulin are also remain truma. So chanami tanina. We learned that as well. A tevel, produce that you have not taken truma off, and you planted. Gidul of mitarim, new growth is mutter. That's only bedavar shazarakala. That's if the seed completely gets destroyed, goes away. Aval bedavar shein zarakala. But like an onion bulb where it doesn't go away, afilu gidul nasrim bachila. So what was the chiddush over there? L'chora, we know the din of gidulei truma, and the din of gidulin is the same thing. So what are you telling me by this, by what was taught by Shesile Trumo Shenitmu Shasla Torah Melatame? What's, it seems superfluous. So Ishtiku, he was quiet, he didn't have an answer. Did you hear something about this? Yeah, I heard a teretz from Rav Sheshes. And it doesn't mean my asurin. What do we mean asurin lezarim? No, asurin lekohanim. Even though they're not tamei, still the kohanim can't eat it. Why? For a different reason. Hesach hadas is taking your mind off of something. Once you take your mind off of something by if you're somebody that guards things regarding tumah, so you can't use it anymore. You got to always be shomer these items. And since by bearing it, there was hesach hadas, it becomes also l'kohanim because of that. So hanich l'mandam hesach hadas psula gufavi. So what does hesach hadas create? Does it create an intrinsic problem? Like Rashi says, malahi, it's an elevation bekodshim, shenifsalu bekach. It's not because they become tamei. It's an intrinsic psul. V'shem psul ulatzmo. Afilu yavo liyo v'yom shalom nitmu kolos hayom shezich daitu. And even if, for example, Eliyahu Novi shows up and says, these 5 days that you took your mind off of it, it never became tamei. We don't listen to it. Why? Because the hesach hadas invalidation is a psul aguf invalidation. So fine, shapir. Then I would understand the sugya. Elamandam hesach hadas psul tumavi. But if the hesach hadas is because we assume that it's tamei, but in a chanami, if Eliyahu Navi showed up and was metired, so Michael Amemar. So again, why should it be a problem for the Kohanim to eat it? And where do we see this whole sugya? The itma. Hesach hadas, taking your mind off something, not being shomer it. Rabbi Yochanan Amar psul tumahavi. Rabbi Yochanan says that it's a tumah problem. And therefore, if Eliyahu Navi came and told us it was not tamei, it would be okay. But Reish Lakish Amar psula gufavi. No, it's an intrinsic invalidation. It has nothing to do with tumah. If Eliyahu Navi showed up and told it, that still would be invalid. Rabbi Yochanan Amar psul tumahavi shim yav Eliyahu v'taren shomim lo. But Reish Lakish Amar psula gufavi shim yav Eliyahu v'taren ein shomim lo. So Eisvei Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Rav Yochanan showed the following problem to Reish Lakish. Rabbi Shmuel ben Rav Yochanan ben Broika Oimer, Lul Kotten Haya, Ben Kevesh Lamizbeach. There was a ramp, the Kevesh going up to the Mizbeach, and there was a little space between where the ramp ended and the Mizbeach was. The Marovashal Kevesh, on the western side of it, that if a bird chatas had become pasul, they would throw it there. They wouldn't burn it right away. To uber tsurason, which means they would let it be nifsal belina. They would let it go all night until the next morning when it becomes noiser. The yoitzin lebeis asreifa, and only then would they burn it. Meaning, cases where sometimes the psul wasn't clear what kind of psul it was, so you wouldn't burn it be a dayim right away because maybe it shouldn't be burned. So you'd wait until it became noiser. Then of course you have to burn it. So l'chura, whatever the psul here was, it was a psul that they didn't want to burn right away, but they waited until the night until let it be pasul belina and then burn it. Now. And obviously, the Gemara seems to understand that there was a hesach hadas here on this bird, chatas. So, and if this hesach hadas caused this chatas oath to become tamei, now I understand mishum hachi boy ibertsura. We're not sure it became Tomei. It's Hesach Hadas, you took your mind off it, so it could have become Tomei. Something may have fallen on it, but we don't know. Maybe Eliyahu Hanavi will come and be Matarid. So why should we just take it out and burn it? Let's wait until it's Pasul Belina till the next morning, and we'll burn it. That makes sense. Like Rav Yochanan says, if you hold that the problem with Hesach Hadas is a Psul Tumah. But if we're holding like Reish Lakish, that Hesach Hadas, taking your mind, you're not being shomerit, causes an intrinsic invalidation. Lamali ibur tzura. Well, you should be able to burn it right away. It's nifsal, burn it. Vatnan. We have a beferish take a mishnah. Zeh klal. Kol shepsula begufo. If it's got a psul vadai, right, like in the meat, became tamei. We saw it. Right? You sarf miyad, you burn it right away. However, bidam ubebailim. Let's say the psul, you spilled the blood, or the bailim became tamei. It's just that you have a problem. For example, there's a korban pesach, but there's nobody to eat it. So in those cases, to uber tzuras and v'yoytz lebeis asrev, then we let it be nifsal belin and burn it the next day. But so this is a kash on Reish Lakish, because the Mishnah said that you wait until the next day. So obviously, Hesach Hadas is not a psul aguf; it's a psul tumah. Omer lei, so Reish Lakish would answer, it's not a kasha. Haitana tana ve'Rabbavu.
Can a Korban Pesach be made chutz lebeis hamikdash, right? Korban Pesach, where can it be done outside the there's a Korban Pesach?
It could be eaten outside.
But the shechita has to be
Shechita
inside.
and zrika were done in the Azara.
Okay, because another question I was but would they make the Korban Pesach when they made it in the Mishkan? They made it at the time before the Beis Mikdash, when they made the Korban Pesach. There was there a zrika also. How was this? They did the zrika. The zrika has to be in the Mikdash, doesn't it?
So there was so first of all, there's a debate. There's a major debate whether the Korban Pesach was offered during the 40 years of the Midbar. But let's say according to the one it was, because remember there was the derech. So that's no problem. Everybody came to the Mishkan, you shechted it, you did zrika sadam, and then you took it back to your tent and you ate it in your tent. What's the shaila?
No, I thought the Korban Pesach can have shechita outside the Mikdash.
Absolutely not. That's why the Bnei Yisrael, there were 11 Amois of the Azar, where Klal Yisrael, you brought your shepsel there. And shechita is kosher bizarre. But the Kabbalah, the Kohen has to be makabel, and he had to stand in the Ezra's Kohanim. So they would receive the blood. Everybody, Gans Klal Yisrael came to the Beis HaMikdash. That's why you've ever taken the tour and you see all those mikvahs there. There's 300 mikvahs and there was right. They had a toga. They would hand their toga. They could be toivel. I don't know, 500,000 people in like an hour. If you ever went on the tour there, by the southern wall, they show you those mikvahs. So in Echanami, the Korban Pesach was shechted in the Beis HaMikdash.
Okay. Yeah.
So I Tana ve'Rabbavu the Omar that afilu pigul ton ibur tzura, that not just a case of a doubtful invalidation, but pigul, there's no greater invalidation than pigul, where if the coin has in mind, for example, to do the zrika tomorrow, that's clearly a psul aguf. According to Tana ve'Rabbavu, everything was left until the next morning before you burnt it. So it's not a kasha for Reish Lakish. Eisvei, Rav Yochanan has another kasha. Nitma o shenifsel abasar. You have a korban, the meat became tamei or became nifsal. O sheyotza chutz l'klaim. Let's say the dam was taken outside of the azara, or the basar was taken outside of the azara. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yizrok. Rabbi Eliezer says you can still do the zrika. Dam afal pi she'ein basar. According to the Shita Rabbi Eliezer, as long as you have dam, even if you don't have any meat, and therefore nobody's going to consume the meat, as long as you have the dam that remains, you can throw the dam, and the korban will be accepted. Rabbi Yeshua Omer lo Yizrok. Rabbi Yeshua says if you don't have meat to eat, im ein basar ein dam. So we're talking about, says Rashi, a case where the meat of koche was taken out of the azara, because their mechitza is the azara. And it became nifsal through yitzia, through taking out. So therefore you have no kosher meat. So therefore, even if you have the blood, Rabbi Yeshua says don't throw it. However, moide Rabbi Yeshua shem zara kortza. Rabbi Yeshua says that if the Kohen did the zrika anyway, wasn't supposed to do it, he did it anyways, it's accepted. Why? Remember, the Kohen Gadol wore the tzitz on his head, which was maratzeh for various psulei tumah. Now, what psula must we be talking about? My nifsal besachadas. When we say nifsal, when we said the ocean nifsal abasar, we're talking about that he took his mind off. And this is the kasha of Rabbi Yochanan. Remember, so we've been debating, Hesach Hadas creates what kind of psul? A psul of Tumah or psul aguf? So if you're going to tell me that the thing is solved by the tzitz only takes care of Tumah problems. So that's why you have the answer here that the tzitz is meratzeh. But if it was another psul, like you took the meat out of the kloim, where the meat itself became invalid, or let's say it's hesach hadas, and you're telling me that it's a psul aguf, then my word said tzitz. The tzitz is not meratzah for those kind of invalidations. The tzitz is only meratzah for tumah problems. And for the Gemara, my nifsal b'tvul yom. A tvul yom is a person who, let's say, was Tomei Mace, counted 7 days, had paraduma sprinkled on him, and then went to the mikveh in the morning. So he's a tvul yom. He can eat meiser, but he can't eat trum and kachim until nightfall. He needs erev shemesh. So the tvul yom touched this meat. So the Gemara says, so iachi ainu tomei. So that's the case of tumah. The Gemara says, Trei Gavni Tomei. It's two types of Tumah. A real Tumah that has the ability to Matame other things, and the Tvul Yom only invalidates. It doesn't have the ability to carry on the Tumah to something else. Kisolik Ravin Amr Lishmaitza Kamed Rav Yirmiyah. Ravin reported this sugi to Rav Yirmiyah. V'omar Babloi Tipshor, these are foolish Babylonians. Mishum Diyasri Ba'ar Chashucha, because they live in a dark land. Amrisun Shmaitza Mechashki, they say over Torah that darkens things. Lo Shmilachu Hadar Reish Lakish Mishmed Rav Oshaya. Didn't you hear of the Torah of Reish Lakish in the name of Rav Oshaya? That Mei HaChag, you have on Sukkot, one of the avodos was Nisuch HaMayim, that they anointed the Mizbech with water. The Me'achag that became Tomei, he's shikon. So you can take water and put it in a mikveh or connect it to a mikveh, and that can be metayar the water. So he's shikon v'achakach dishan, and let's say it was only magdish in a kli for the nisuch, so it works to hoyrin. However, if you were magdish it first, but if you did the hagdasha first, then the mikveh doesn't purify it. Michte. Hashaka, connecting water to a mikveh, is like zriya ninu. It's similar to planting something in the ground, like what we did with the plantings. So, what do we care? Mali shikan v'achakach dishan, mali dishan v'achakach shikan. I mean, when you had something when you had the truma and you planted it in the ground, it didn't make a difference when. Alma ein zriya lehegdish. Comes out that something of hegdish, we don't rely on this ability of zriya to be metarid. Achanami ein zriya letruma. So that's our answer to the question we started tonight learning. That you cannot unpurify and make tahor by planting. That's why the Kohen still could not eat it. That's why it said asur in the Kohen. Yosef Ravdimi v'Karmelai Shmaitza. Armelei Abaya Higdishan B'Kli Ka'amar. That which we said that the Me'achag are Magdish in a Kli. Did you put in a Kli? And that's why it has a certain Maila and you can't purify it through Zriya. Aval B'Peh Lo Avid Rabbanan Maila. But let's say you only declared this water to be sanctified not through a Kli, but through your mouth. Does the Maila exist? Or maybe by declaring it Hegdish by Peh, you also have the special elevation that we've been learning. I didn't hear the answer to that, but Kiyotsu b'Shamati. Similar to that, I heard the Amrav Avom Rav Yerton. Anovim shenitmu. Remember yesterday we learned about grapes and the fluid inside of grapes. Is it considered absorbed in the fruit, or is it considered like beverage in a cup? Anovim shenitmu. If the grapes became tamei, darchan, if you stepped on it and got the juice out, va'achakach higdishan tohorin. They remain tohor. But higdishan, if you were magdish it when they were grapes, va'achakach darchan tmein. Now va'anovim, there's no kli that you put grapes in, the kedushas peninu. You would have declared them kadosh. But you see, this ability or this maila to make, once you're magdish, you can't be matarid anymore. It's a maila even when you are magdish, prepare. Rav Yosef anovim ka'amrit. We're not talking about regular grapes. Anovim shel truma askinan. These were truma grapes. The kedushas petidu, kedushas klidanya. When you separate truma, you do it prepare always. You don't use a kli. By hegdish, there are two ways to be magdish something. You could put it in a kli shares, or you could be magdish prepare. Avalhani, the boy kli, bapel over Rabbana Maila. More says there's no proof from what you brought that perhaps when you sanctify something using your mouth, that it would have the same stringency. Now, yesterday we learned something about Rabbi Yochanan saying that you should when you do the Lucy Ricardo thing and you squash the grapes, you should make sure to do it less than the kibetza, right? But what we just said, dorach nafilu tuva, it didn't give a limit. Yesterday you taught us that in order for it not to become tameh, you've got to do it less than the kibetza, which with less than the kibetza, it can't accept tumah. So what's going on here? That means right up above when it said darchan, it means pachos mikabetza. It depends. There denagalu berishon. Somebody who had been touched by an avatuma became a rishon, touched those grapes, dahavalu inu sheni, and then it became a sheni, and then it can convert. But hacha we're talking about denagu b'sheni, dahavalu shlishi. And that's not going to work because it won't convey tumah beyond that. And Amar Rav Afanana mitanina, v'nasan alav ma'im chayim el keli. This is by the Efer Paraduma. Shetiyeh chiyusim bakli. It has to flow directly from the spring into the kli. V'nasan. But then it says you shall put it into the kli, alma tlushininu. That seems to imply that you've pulled water from the spring. How can you fulfill both aspects? Elamaila. It's a special, it's mutter that you can use mayim she'uvim. Chanami maila. Okay. So we will continue tomorrow morning.
Let me ask you, in Pigul, if it doesn't be B'shogeg, why couldn't it sits be Matahir it? Why couldn't it sits be it? Is that a Kedushas?
The pigul was only Matar for Tumah.